So first of all, I'd just like to say thanks, especially to all of our partners with our Public Works Department to clear brush in and around the city of Pasadena. But we'd also like to thank our many residents. There's about 4,000 inspections that our fire department does each and every year, and our residents do an awesome job clearing the brush around their homes. Thought things couldn't get any worse. This is a year that is going to be worse than any other, is what the projections are telling us.
James Farr here, live from Pasadena Media Studios. Get ready for more piercing and provocative. The Conversation Live starts now. And welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. We're back for season 4. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Coming up today, we're going to have a critical and possibly uncomfortable conversation. Martin Gordon is in the seat. Martin is the chairman of the Pasadena Community Coalition, and we want to talk about this recent reassignment that City Manager Steve Mermell made of the fire chief to some department that we don't even completely understand. We also want to talk about our upcoming candidates forum, which takes place on Sunday, February the 16th at the Friendship Church. We want to unpack some of the issues, discuss the candidates, and then also we want to talk a little bit more about the Pasadena Community Coalition. But first, before I welcome Martin into the seat, let's get some backstory on what's going on over at City Hall with Chief Washington.
This is your local news brief for Friday, February 7th, 2020. Brian Frieders has stepped in as Pasadena's acting fire chief after city manager Steve Mermell reassigned the previous chief, Bertrall Washington, to the city manager's office for work in public safety projects. Pasadena Firefighters Union Local 809 has expressed support for Frieders stepping into the role. Former Chief Washington clashed with the union during his tenure, but many people in the community supported him. The move left concern about diversity in city leadership. Even before the situation with our respected Fire Chief Bertrall Washington, I shared with City Manager Steve Mermell that I have not been happy that there are not more African Americans on his executive leadership team, said Councilmember John Kennedy. 3 of the last 4 fire chiefs, Ernest Mitchell, Calvin Wells, and Washington, have been African American.
And welcome back. Martin, thank you so much, brother, for being here in the seat and taking time out of your schedule. We got some smoke and fires happening in the city. I mean, you watched Monday night's city council meeting, right?
Yes, I did.
And both Vice Mayor Hampton as well as Council Member Kennedy and nearly 100 people, including NAACP President Alan Edson, all stood in solidarity and called out some issues that they see as being wrong. What was your take of last night?
Well, first of all, I was so thankful for Alan Edson and the NAACP and the people that came forward to bring this to the forefront. Oftentimes we sit back and we let these things happen, and then a couple of months later, we try to move forward. We got on top of this right away. I thought that was great. I think some of the response was outrageous.
Okay, because I definitely want to get specifically Councilmember Kennedy, hit on the point that, perhaps folks who at that level, should live in the city. He was saying, I guess he was saying that in response to City Manager Mermell. But what was some of your reaction about what Councilman Kennedy said, or even Hampton? Because they made some strong remarks.
They made some very strong remarks, and I want to give them their kudos for standing up for our community, standing up for leadership, and telling the community and the city council that this kind of action is not okay. I don't know, I've been an executive director of a nonprofit. I've worked in the government. I have never heard of, and I want people to think about this, I've never heard of someone at the highest level, of an organization being terminated or moved without you talking to the person above you. So if I was the executive director and somebody who's my associate executive director wanted to remove one of my directors, they would come to me, tell me what was happening, what was going on. We would discuss this and move forward. The city manager reports to the city council.
But isn't it the city manager's call? I mean, because I think what you're flirting with, what I heard last night in some of the public comments, is that he didn't do this in a vacuum. Like, there may be some or others complicit in knowing this. I do know the chair of the Public Safety Committee did not know. I know another member of the Public Safety Committee, Vice Mayor Hampton, did not know. I don't know if Council Member Steve Madison knew. He has an endorsement from the Fire Association. And I don't know if the mayor knew or did not know. So what do you think about it?
Well, that's interesting. One of the things that that really concerns me is that we talk about, sometimes we talk about civilian oversight of the Pasadena Police Department, and that the Public Safety Committee is the entity that does oversight of public safety. And the chair of the Public Safety Committee doesn't know that the chief of the fire department, is going to be terminated. That doesn't make sense. That kind of gives me pause about, is there really oversight, whether it's the police department, the fire department, or public safety? Is this just something that we do?
So let's look at the timeline, right? Because, and then I want to get your reaction to what City Manager Mermel's comments were last night, his statement that he made. But it was, I've confirmed that City Manager Mermel said in a public meeting with staff on the 21st of January that the fire chief was placed on administrative leave. It's not until last Wednesday, we understand that he's now been reassigned. What's in between there? Because is that them sending him to the door of no return? How do you read that? Because you got a whole lot more experience than me.
Well, historically, we know what it means to be sent to City Hall on special assignment. That means you're getting ready to be moved right out the door.
Okay.
And so
the door of no return.
Yeah, it's the door of no return. There's some history behind that, and 3 or 4 people that we know, more than that.
Let's just call it Dr. Walsh.
Yes.
Andy Green.
Yes.
Trail Washington.
Yes,
Okay.
and they're sent there, and there have been others, and I don't want to go through great detail, but when you go there, you're out the door. So you're put on administrative leave, you get nervous about the dynamic of what's going to happen with that, and then you say, well, I'll put you on special assignment, and we'll move you out slowly, and try to make sure that the community never gets involved in this in any way, shape, or form. And I understand this dynamic, by the way, that this is a personnel matter, and there are some things that you can't talk about. But on the other hand, there is no reason why the chair of the Public Safety Committee, that the City Council is not being involved in the process in terms of knowing what's going on and bringing that information out to the people. That's unconscionable to me. That doesn't make sense. And whether it's the mayor or those who are not in the know that were on the Public Safety Committee, they have a real concern, and I'm glad that they spoke out to say, what the heck is going on here?
But if it's a personnel issue, right, and Councilmember Gordo spoke adamantly about protecting the chief's privacy. Did the city manager violate that privacy when he announced in a meeting that the chief had been placed on leave? Is that normal HR? Is that how things go?
Well,
because his bosses didn't know, but he told his subordinate staff.
Does that seem to make sense?
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me.
I'm
so you
asking
tell your subordinates what's happening, and the mayor doesn't know, and the chair of the Public Safety Committee, that the whole City Council doesn't know. It's someone at that level.
What do you make of his response, his statement that he made last night?
Whose statement?
City Manager Mermel.
What is there to say? It didn't make sense to me in any way, shape, or form. It just didn't make sense to me in any way, shape, or form. The only response that I could possibly have heard that I could understand was, I apologize for the way this was handled, and I'm going to go back and look at what I've done and what I should do in the future, and I'm going to come back with a statement about how I'm going to fix this situation.
Last question. What do you think is going to be the outcome? Does the chief get reinstated, or does he continue to be shown the door?
Well, that's up to us. That's up to us. When I say us, I'm talking about the community. And I'm not just talking about the African American community, I'm talking about the community as a whole. We have to get together and say, this is not okay, not just for an African American, but anybody in that position should not be treated this way. So I'm not sure where this is going to go, but it's not going to be pretty.
Let me check it. You're watching the Conversation Live. Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. I want to talk about this upcoming election. Martin and I will be participating in a candidates forum with mayoral candidates. But Hannah, let's first go ahead and roll in this next segment. Let's find out who the candidates are, and then I'll talk to Martin on the other side of it.
This is your local news brief for Friday, February 7th, 2020. Incumbent Mayor Terry Turnick, Jason Hardin, Major Williams, and Victor Gordo will face off on Sunday, February 16th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Friendship Church. The candidates will address issues such as rent control, West Pasadena's depletion of the African American community, affordable housing, cannabis, and more. They will also respond to inquiries from the community. Moderator Martin Gordon, chairman of the Pasadena Community Coalition, said the forum will bring different and diverse ideas to candidates and into the community for discussion. This will be the final Pasadena Mayoral Candidates Forum before the California primary.
And welcome back. Martin, 4 candidates in the race. Victor
Yes.
Gordo, Jason Hardin, Terry Turnick, Major Williams. Let's talk about Victor Gordo first. Like, dislike, what's your experience with Victor?
Well, I know Victor basically from his time on the council.
19 years.
Yeah, a long, long time. I don't have a lot to say about Victor, as I haven't had a lot of contact with Victor. Unfortunately, I oftentimes have problems getting in contact with Victor, and that's problematic for me. I like any politician to be accessible to the community, and I've been here for a long time.
I mean, you've said that before, and I share with you. He returns my calls, and he responds to my text message and email. So, is there a dynamic in play here that maybe I'm missing?
I guess there's a dynamic I'm missing. Mm-hmm. There's not a city council person that I have ever called. I called Steve Madison, he calls me back. I called G. Masuda, he calls me back. And these are not necessarily people that have the same ideas that I have. When I called the mayor, he calls me back. When I called Bill Bogart, he called me back. And so people knowing that I care about this community, and when I call you, I'm calling to ask you something that is important and viable in terms of developing something positive for our community. So I'm not sure what that is. So I can't give you too much about Victor, as that communication hasn't been that great.
Jason Hardin.
I really like Jason, and I've heard a lot of people say this to me. Jason Hardin doesn't have a whole lot of expertise about being a politician, and that Jason has done this and Jason has done that. Listen, Jason Hardin has been here in this community. He's walked the community. He's done things in the community, and he knows what's going on in our community. Whether or not he's ready to be mayor, that's a different question. But to question his rightfulness to be in a chair to run for mayor, let me see any of the naysayers step forward, put themselves on the spot, and be that person for the community. I like him a lot because I think that he is a young person who's going to develop and grow in the future, and I thank him for stepping out when other people say, what are you going to do? He says, here's what I'm going to do, and I stand by it.
I know him through his work in community with his film and some of the other things he's involved in. I've been very impressed just with how he's shown up from 5 years ago when he ran.
Excellent.
You know what I mean? And
yes,
so
excellent.
That is refreshing in terms of seeing that new leadership is being replenished and being developed within the city. Mayor Turnick.
Mayor Tornick has been around for a long time now, too, on City Council. One of the things that I like about Mayor Tornick is that he's accessible. That's a big deal for me. A number of the City Council people that I like are not so much in the sphere of the things that I want to happen, are real good at communication. And I feel like no matter what's going on, you can, if you have an open line of communication, you can get something done. Terry's been there, and he's been that person. So I like that about him. Going back to Terry and some of the other candidates and Victor, I want to tell you the truth. That some of the candidates, I don't see a whole lot of difference. There's just this little tiny thing here that makes a difference between the two. But some of them are really big for our community, and that's going to come out at our candidates forum.
Yeah, I mean, because you've attended other forums, and we'll talk about the forum and what's going to make it a little bit different, right?
Yes.
Major Williams.
I like Major. Once again, Major hasn't been in our community that long. And
is that really important? Does that matter? How long he's been here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To me, and I think to the community it does. Here's what happens is that I heard at a couple of events that he had, he talked about the Pasadena Way, and he talked about, you can't even understand the Pasadena Way until you've been here long enough to understand Pasadena itself. And so I'm not angry at anybody who wants to come new and become fresh, but you got to be a little bit more knowledgeable about what's going on in this community. And so I think he's learning. I think he's been overwhelmed in some ways about the magnitude of what people do in Pasadena, because we are a very, very, very active community. And so when you come and you do a town hall, you better come correct and you better be ready, because not just these the pundits and all the guy on the street, is well versed in what's going to happen in their community, and you've got to deal with them.
Let me check in. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. My guest today is Martin Gordon. Martin is the chairman of the Pasadena Community Coalition, and we've talked about the reassignment of Chief Washington to City Hall and the city manager's office. We've also talked about the 4 mayoral candidates, as well as this candidates forum that we're going to be facilitating on this upcoming Sunday. I want to talk with Martin a little bit about the issues, but first, Martin, why is this candidates forum different? Because you've been to several, I've watched them all online. Why do you think this is different? I know it's the last one. Ballots already out in the mail. Polls will open real soon. Why should people come to this one?
I think this is going to be different for a number of reasons. We're going to take some of the issues that you've already talked about and heard about and clarify them in a very short way, what I call the lightning round. And that's to say, we've heard some of these answers and we've heard what people say. We want to nail it down to yes, no, and why in just a short segment. So you can go down. What I like for people to do is get them a little card and say, oh, I really didn't understand that's what this guy really meant. And then as we do that and open up the door, we're going to go into a little bit more detail and make the candidates explain on some of the major issues, especially in the African American and the Northwest community, of exactly what you're saying.
So there will be no rounds where candidates will have 4 or 5 minutes to stump. It's quicker, faster.
Yeah, quicker, faster, and let's get to it.
Let's get to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about some of the issues real quick. And after we get on the other side of that, just about maybe 7 minutes before we got to get out of here. Police civilian oversight.
What's interesting is that all of the candidates, it seems, except for maybe one, say that there should never be any civilian oversight of the police department. That seems to be unconscionable. And in fact, if you will go back and look at what was happening in the police department less than 5 years ago, there was actually a civilian oversight of the police department built in to the police department structure. That was torn down, saying that it did not comply with the Brown Act. Once I brought it to the attention of the police department in the city. There was a way to bring that back, and it actually has some civilian oversight. So
what would make it different? Because, some have said it doesn't work, right? So what do we need? Well, I guess that's not your question to answer.
I think that's a candidate's question.
That's the candidate's question.
But since you asked that question, I'm going to give you something that's a little bit more generic.
Okay.
We don't have to do what happened in Los Angeles.
Gotcha.
We don't have to do what happened in Long Beach. We are Pasadena. We can find a way to have civilian oversight in a way that makes sense for us. And so I have thousands of ideas on that, worked on that for quite some time, and they'll come forward in the future. But there is a way to make sure that the community is a part of the development of the police department.
Homeless and safe harbor parking.
It's just a matter of fact. We need to figure out something about safe harbor. It's been happening around the country. We know it's got to come to Pasadena. We know that we have students at Pasadena City College that are homeless, that have no place to go but sleep in their car.
What about the NIMBYism part of it? Like, you know, not in my neighborhood.
Guess what? Not my problem. Not in my problem. You know what? We got to have it in our neighborhood. If you don't want it in your neighborhood, move. That's my
rent control, affordable housing.
You know what? I've heard from all of the candidates. I shouldn't say all of the candidates that you know, rent control can't happen. We have a certain amount of rent control that's going to happen. The real issue here is, do we need to do more with rent control? And if we do, let's talk about it. But if we're not going to do rent control, here's my concern. If we're not going to do rent control, then tell me the alternative and give me something to look at that says I'm going to develop that affordable housing in a different way so we don't need rent control. If you can't do that, then the default is rent control. So make your case.
Okay, so do you think the city should be building vertically? Because we don't have any land to expand. How do we? Not your question to answer.
Well, I know it's not my question to answer, but let me just say this. You know, you see all the land we have from the 710? All that land there? We don't have to go up there. That land's right there. That's where a majority of African Americans lived in that land, and we're pushed up out of that land with a 710. There's no 710. Let's push some of those African Americans and people back into that land and make some affordable housing right there.
Cannabis.
Oh my goodness. What can I say about cannabis? Was there a fiasco in how this all came about? I'm sorry to say, yes. Did I predict this probably 2 or 3 years ago? Yes. In a letter to the city council and to the city, I said, listen, we've got to get a handle on the licensing of cannabis. It cannot be just for rich white people. Some people are not going to like that. It's too bad. That's what happened. What we needed to do was to make sure that those most affected by the drug wars had a piece of the pie. That didn't happen. So when we took and said large corporations and only those that had lots of money could get those licenses, and made no avenue or a path for African Americans and people of color to get a piece of the pie, to be vendors, to be a part of those businesses, that was just absolutely wrong.
Well, it seems that it's become a liability for the city. They're being sued by several corporations who were in the application process. Vice Mayor Hampton is calling for it to be scrapped and start all over. What do you think? Is that possible? Is that going to happen?
Well, I don't really know what's going to happen, but let me tell you two things. Number one is, if it was a scrap and start all over, boy, that's a big process. Think of the process we did so far. And we have 2 people that have CUPs now, so that's one thing. The other thing is the people who want to come in. This is some of the people that were here. There were like over 28, I think, cannabis operators here in Pasadena. My concern is that the 28 operators that were here in Pasadena, they didn't care anything about social equity.
No.
They didn't care anything about a path to ownership for African Americans, but now they want to make sure they come back. Where were you before, when I could have listened to you and said, hey, before this process comes, I was a smaller place. I am doing something for African Americans. I am making a path towards them being a part of this economic boon, and that I am going to donate money to organizations that help people that are most affected by the drug wars. No, to donate to these large corporations that have their whole departments that go out and make money doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, should we blow up the whole thing up? I don't know. After I got through talking, maybe we should and start where we should have started, which is let's look at the small vendor and say, hey, we need to make sure that the people in the community, and I'm talking about African Americans who were the most affected by this, get a piece of the pie.
Well, we're coming up hard on the time. We got to get out of here in just a couple of minutes. Pasadena Community Coalition has been around for many years.
Many years.
Tell us a little bit more about the work you've done over the years and where you are right now. We've got about 2 minutes before we get out of here.
Okay, that's not enough time, but let me just say this. The real purpose of the Pasadena Community Coalition is to be a watchdog for this community and to make sure that those things that are happening in our community that can have a negative effect on our communities, that we bring them forward for discussion, for action items, and bring groups together to look at that process. We're not here to be another organization to do this, that. We want to look at what's happening, what we need to deal with. Cannabis is a good example, and to say, guess what? We want to bring all those people together and say, let's work on a solution to this problem and work on it together and move forward together to bring it to conclusion for the betterment of our community. And so that's our goal. Our goal is to not be a new organization that tells everybody what to do, but be an organization that looks at that problem, identifies some of the issues, and brings the people together and say, here's the information you need to move forward because I'm too old to do this work. I need young people.
Last two questions. Why was it important that Friendship Church be the venue of choice for the candidates forum?
I was so excited when the pastor said that we could be there. It is it may be the oldest African American church in the city of Pasadena, and right in West Pasadena, right where there used to be predominantly African Americans. The pastor told me a story the other day where a young white family came in and said to him, "Welcome to the neighborhood." And I cracked up and I said, "Not to you, the pastor." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I told them, no, we've been in this neighborhood since I think 1929. You welcome to the neighborhood."
Yeah. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King spoke there just recently. The Honorable Elijah Cummings also spoke there. So, I mean, it has a very storied history.
Yes.
Beautiful venue, and we certainly thank Pastor Smith and the entire Friendship family. We're just about hard up on the time. I wanted to give a little bit more time to the Burt Chief Washington thing, but it is developing. I mean, there will be more that's coming. Hopefully the city will honor my request for public information. I want to know it all. I want all the documents. My guest today has been Martin Gordon. Martin, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, again, thank you for watching the Conversation Live. This is season 4, season premiere. As always, agape.